עצרו, אנחנו בשדה מוקשים!
סמק! לא עושים עכשיו.
שקט אילן, אתה רוצה להביא לפה את כל הצבא הסורי?
זהו, אין כבר דרך חזרה.
אבל אין שום סיכוי שנצא מהשדה מוקשים הזה בחיים.
נו, לפחות נמות כולנו ביחד.
זה לא מצחיק לך. יש כאן איזה 100,000 מוקשים. לא חייבים לזחול את הדרך שלנו החוצה. קדימה, להוציא את הכידונים ולעשות מה שלמדנו בתרגולת. קדימה, ברגע שמגיעים למוקש, אנחנו חופרים סביבו, מוציאים אותו בזהירות ומנטרלים אותו. זאת הדרך היחידה שלנו לצאת מכאן. קדימה.
אם לא נספיק עד הזריחה...
אנחנו נספיק עד הזריחה. קדימה. לפעול בזהירות.
My name is Michael Greenspan. I'm an investigative journalist, one of those guys you see on the evening news. Sometimes our efforts bring about long overdue changes. Other times what we do is debatable. We seldom have answers. Our job is to raise the questions. Some stories put life and death on the line, and some touch something much deeper. Some would say much higher. It's a story like this that put me on tonight's flight to Tel Aviv. How I got here started with a phone call from an old friend. A production company in LA was doing a film about unexplainable phenomena during Israel's wars. Some of the stories were actually being called miracles. I couldn't escape the possibility that this assignment might help me explain how my people managed to survive 2,000 years of exile and then build a nation out of almost nothing. If there are miracles, Israel itself has to be one. Born out of the ashes of the Holocaust, it was just one day old when it was attacked by 12 armies that the world fully expected would annihilate it. There was one tank and 5 cannon with which to fight back an armada against them. And yet, Israel won. How? Every time Israel has been attacked, Pentagon and Kremlin leaders have declared defeat as inevitable. The military experts at West Point won't study Israel's wars because their outcomes are too impossible. But the anomalies don't stop on the battlefield. How did Hebrew become the only dead language in history to be revived after 2,000 years? Why would millions of people from around the world leave their homes and move to a desert wasteland to build new lives for themselves? How did these people manage to turn a land more than 80% desert into one of the largest food and flour exporters in the world? Why have incredible achievements in science, medicine, and new technologies happened here in greater concentration than anywhere else? There are no logical answers.
Please fasten your seatbelts for the rest of the flight, and welcome to...
The road from the airport to Jerusalem takes about 30 minutes. But once you reach the old city, it feels like you've been traveling for centuries. Jerusalem is 3,000 years old, holy to Jews, Muslims, and Christians. This is the city of David, where Solomon built the temple, where God said he would forever dwell and watch over his chosen people. Of all the places to look for miracles, it should be here. Israel's history is filled with stories of miracles. The parting of the Red Sea, the sun standing still so Joshua could finish a battle, David killing the giant Goliath. If these stories are more than fables, then it wouldn't be inconceivable that they still happen. Today I'm investigating such a story. 8 miles north of Jerusalem is a forgettable backwater town called Michmash. Most people have never even heard of it. But two parallel stories apparently occurred here almost 3,000 years apart. One story is in the Bible. The other is recorded in the British war journals of World War I and in the personal memoirs of English Brigadier Major Vivian Gilbert, who was here in 1917. Historian Meir Halevi agreed to discuss what has been called the miracle at Michmash.
This is a historical place where we can see, according to the Bible, the big rock, Sinai, and the other big rock, Botzets. And here we have a living stories, a living history coming out of this place.
I'm also meeting historian Yehuda Noblach, who has studied the events that took place here.
Wadi Michmash used to be the main way of going from Jericho to Jerusalem. The most recent story is times of the British.
In 1917, the world was at war. Turkey's decision to join Germany against England and France would spell the end of the Ottoman Empire. The Turks had ruled for 400 years. In September, General Allenby arrived in Cairo. By December, Jerusalem was in British hands. On December 9th, Allenby approached Jerusalem's Jaffa Gate, then dismounted his horse and walked into the city on foot, declaring, "I come not as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim." Brigadier Major Vivian Gilbert was there.
People tell me soldiers have no souls. I refuse to believe it. I know what was in our thoughts that day. We experienced the thrill of those that make history. We were proud that Jerusalem, after languishing for over 400 years, should be free at last, and that the prize for which we had undergone so many months of weary fighting should be ours. We felt that somehow it was worth the privations, the heat, the thirst, the loss of comrades who had been more than brothers, the sad memory of lonely graves in Judean hills, the wounds and weariness, to free the Holy Land forever.
February 18, 1918. It had been 2 months since we took Jerusalem. General Allenby has sent my brigade to capture the Turkish garrison at Michmash before the invasion of Jericho. We fully expect the Turks to mount a counter-offensive to try and retake Jerusalem. It will only be safe when we have liberated all of Palestine. We arrived in Michmash Valley yesterday. I'm certain the Turks don't expect an attack. We appear to have arrived undetected. Our general has planned an all-out frontal assault for tomorrow. Artillery, infantry, cavalry. Earlier this evening, I decided to see what we'll be up against tomorrow. I took 2 men with me to scout the Turkish camp on the cliffs above the valley. The cliffs above Michmash Valley create a formidable fortress. Any attempt to climb the canyon walls would be to invite almost certain suicide. Even so, if there was a way up the cliffs, it would catch the Turks by total surprise. The Turkish garrison is enormous, perhaps several thousand strong. An attack from any side but the steep canyon would be in full sight of the enemy for a great distance. A surprise attack would be impossible unless it was from the canyon itself. With the Turks distracted by an advanced assault on the cliffs, our cavalry could then charge from the plain unnoticed, so they were almost upon them. But without any way to get up the steep cliffs, such a plan is impossible. All night long, I've not been able to escape the thought that I've read about Michmash before. It finally struck me when I opened my Bible. The story's in the book of Samuel. The prophet recorded a battle that became a miracle, that took place in this same valley and on these same cliffs 3,000 years ago. The enormous Philistine army was garrisoned on the plain above the valley of Michmash. They were fearless and brutal. Their raiding parties raped and pillaged the people of Israel without mercy. They seemed unconquerable. The last thing they expected was an attack, certainly not from King Saul of Israel. Any approaching enemy could be seen from miles away. An outpost guarded the steep cliffs down to the canyon, the only possible path for a surprise attack, and the cliffs made such an approach almost unthinkable. At the far end of the canyon, King Saul, Israel's first king, had a force of barely 600 men, camped in the same place where we sat now. Saul's army was demoralized and weak. Only Saul and his son Jonathan even had a sword. The Philistines had not allowed any blacksmiths in Israel, fearing the Israelites would make weapons to defend themselves. Saul was beside himself as to what to do. But Saul's son Jonathan was not intimidated by the Philistines. A young man of faith and a lot of courage, Jonathan slipped out of the camp one night with his armor-bearer to go find out if God would bring Israel a victory over the Philistines. The two men ventured into the moonlit valley, knowing they would easily be seen by the lookouts at the Philistine outpost.
אם הם יגידו לנו לעלות אליהם, זה סימן שאלוהים ייתן לנו ניצחון גדול על הפלישתים הערלים האלה. אבל אם הם יגידו לנו לחכות כאן עד שהם ירדו אלינו, נחזור למחנה. כי זה יהיה האות שאלוהים לא ייתן אותם בידינו.
אני איתך בלב ובנפש, יונתן.
הבה נתגלה בפניהם.
هم الخنازير! هم الكلاب! صرخت لهم! صرخت لهم! ادعوا! ادعوا هنيا! الموتي! ادخلوا من الميتين! عندنا تعال تعال هنيا! لا! صرخت لهم قتل الكلاب! ها هما! صرخت لهم! اخرجوا! اخرجوا! كنتم رجال! تعالوا اليهم! انظروا! تعالوا! انظروا! انظروا عليهم كذباب! لا 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 ضعوف تعال
Without gathering their weapons, the soldiers began running away in all directions. When Saul's lookouts saw what was happening, they ran to the king and reported what they saw.
אדוני המלך, התעורר, התעורר.
אומר, מה העניין?
הפלישתים מלכי, הם בורחים.
אתה מעיר אותי כדי לספר לי מעשיות?
לא מלכי, זאת האמת לאמיתה.
עוד מעלתו, ראינו זאת במו עינינו.
מה ראיתם?
הם נלחמים זה בזה בניסיון לברוח.
לברוח ממה?
לא יכולנו להבחין, אבל ראינו כי הם נסים לעבר הגבעות.
מהר אבנר אסף את הצבא?
כן, אדוני המלך.
היכן יונתן?
איני יודע מלכי, הוא לא בעול שלו, כבר בדקתי.
אז מצא אותו ותאמר לאחי הכהן שהביא את ארון האלוהים. נתן, קרא ונע.
Meanwhile, the tumult in the Philistine camp reached pandemonium. In their panic, the Philistine soldiers were killing one another in a frenzied attempt to escape the massive army they thought was attacking them. The Bible says that panic struck the whole army. The ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. Saul ordered the high priest Ahijah to bring up the Ark of the Covenant to inquire of God what he should do. Saul and his men set out to attack the Philistines. Reaching the abandoned camp, they picked up thousands of weapons left behind by the fleeing Philistine army. Saul and his men would chase them down and realize a great victory over their oppressors. The Bible declares, the Lord rescued Israel that day. We had found Jonathan's secret, the pass he had used to climb the steep cliff. The Turks would never expect an attack from the cliffs. A 3,000-year-old Bible story held the key to our 20th century battle plan.
Gilbert, this is outstanding.
The Turkish army was asleep, unaware of our presence. Together we were about to repeat a 3,000-year-old story.
بوم. يلا.
نحن ضع من تحت الهجوم سيدي. الجنرال الإنجليزي ألمبي يمكن قابل جيش لمكماش.
وألمبي والمغلازة. يتي.
مش حرير. ايش دعوة معك؟ ايش هذا؟
And so, after thousands of years, British troops successfully copied the tactics of Saul and Jonathan. The afternoon before I left Palestine for England, I wanted to be alone. For 4 years, I had been constantly with men I had learned to admire and trust. I had been through the horrors of a great war, but now the country was at peace and the people were free. We had finished our mission. Peace and freedom were in the Holy Land for the first time for 500 years. And it all seemed worthwhile.
Is there a miracle in the Vivian Gilbert story? Historian Meir Halevi is convinced there is.
Okay, Vivian Gilbert looks in his Bible because this place reminds him of something, and he sees the story of Jonathan against the Philistines and says, ah, this is a very good piece of tactical warfare. I'll try the same tactic and see if it works.
No reasonable and rational soldier or major or officer will come against the Turkish Empire that lands on the plateau right here. This is a miracle.
You think that God throughout history has been especially kind to the Jewish people in performing miracles?
No, he has a redemption. He has a goal to the whole world, and he brings the whole world to this target. And whenever the world does not go to exactly the direction that he wants us to be in, he's just doing a miracle, just, you know, giving us the right direction.
The entire British campaign in Palestine in World War I is filled with such unexplainable stories. Consider this incredible discovery. In Vivian Gilbert's journal, he observed that Britain's liberation of Jerusalem had fulfilled an ancient prophecy. 2,000 years ago, the prophet Daniel received a vision that Jerusalem would be delivered from its enemies in 1,335 years. The prophet Haggai later added that the day of blessing would come on the 24th day of the 9th month of the Hebrew calendar. The date foretold by these two prophets was December the 9th, 1917. The very day the mayor of Jerusalem handed over the keys of the city to the British Army. Historian Yehuda Noblach put it this way:
God makes history, makes the future too.
If God makes history, how can I understand why so many terrible things have befallen Jews over the centuries? How can I explain the destruction of Israel by the Romans, the pogroms of the Russian Tsars, the Nazi Holocaust? Where was God in history at those times? For me, today raised more questions than answers. What one man sees as just great luck, another man sees as nothing short of a miracle from God. But some stories step outside the realm of good luck. You either have to believe or you don't. There's no middle ground. I'm meeting a former army commander in Jerusalem today with such a story from the Six-Day War in 1967. The Six-Day War, fought and won in just 6 days, has been called by some a true miracle. At the same time, others insist it was a consummate demonstration of planning, preparation, and battlefield courage. Whatever your position on miracles, it was certainly against all odds. For many, the Six-Day War in 1967 ultimately came down to the battle for Jerusalem. It is the most sacred place in Jewish history. The fight for its control was desperate and difficult. Yoram Zamush was a young paratrooper assigned to the capture of the Temple Mount. I met him in front of the western wall of the temple.
Yoram, when you first heard that your unit was going to have the mission of breaking through into the old city of Jerusalem, how did you feel?
Myself, maybe more than others, had a sense of longing for this city. To think we were about to finally fight in Jerusalem to liberate it. Remembering our parents, grandparents back in Auschwitz, this was the climax of their wishes. When we spoke among ourselves, we felt we were touching and even making history.
It was not a very easy thing to get into the old city, was it?
It was a very difficult battle. We lost a third of our unit. There were more than 86 casualties. Hundreds were wounded.
רגע, חכו רגע. קח צעד קדימה. קדם אחד קדימה.
The city seemed deserted, but there was a danger of snipers everywhere. The way to the Wailing Wall was through the green door, which we found locked. An old Arab man suddenly stepped forward and, speaking in Hebrew, greeted us. He said he wanted peace in the holy city. For several minutes, we were at the wall's courtyard, just a handful of us soldiers. Those first minutes were so quiet, no gunshots. We all prayed, even those of us who weren't great believers. We all wanted to be part of the Jewish people at that point.
Zion.
We were the messengers of the entire Jewish people throughout all generations. We haven't arrived at this point by accident.
It was June 7th, 1967. News of the liberation of Jerusalem spread like wildfire throughout the country. Tank commanders stopped to pray. Soldiers on the front lines cheered. The nation celebrated. Around the world, faithful Jews and Christians alike wept for joy at the news that 200 centuries of prayer had finally been answered. Today I'm driving up to the Golan Heights, a land of gently rolling hills and beautiful valleys that form the northern border between Israel and Syria. I'm going there to meet David Yaniv, a veteran tank commander in the 1973 Yom Kippur War.
David, this must bring back a lot of memories for you being up here.
Oh, I'll tell you something, this is such nostalgia for me, especially after so many years, just to walk in the same place where I used to be. You know, this area over there, just in front of us there, if you can look there. We were on foot trying to find a way to get to this village.
David Yaniv was a young tank commander during the Yom Kippur War. We met on a windswept hillside just above a battlefield that holds some incredible memories for David and his comrades.
So what do you do in a situation like that?
You get on your knees very quickly.
יש כאן איזה 100,000 מוקשים. לא חייבים לזחול את הדרך שלנו החוצה.
You take out your bayonet and you start finding mines.
This was a life-threatening situation. In other words, if you went forward, it was dangerous. What about just retreating?
Whichever way, whether it's to the left, to the right, backwards or forwards, I mean, it's a minefield. We did the best we could. And we dug ourselves, we managed to expose a few and dismantle them. And it was a very slow process. But at this particular point, a very, very strong gust of wind came. Something which we could not explain at all. I mean, it was so strong that we literally felt that we were flying away. That's how strong it was. And mines that were buried 25, 30 centimeters in the ground just exposed themselves, and we didn't have to dig them out. We were just walking through them.
This is something I gather you hadn't seen the likes of before.
No way did we see that. In fact, when we came back, nobody could understand that. And of course, we didn't think of it as a miraculous thing from God or anything. We just thought, well, that was just a fluke, a wind that came, which we couldn't explain, and that was it.
Well, when did the thought first hit you that it might have been an act of God?
When we came back and we're alive. When we really touched ourselves and thought, well, we're alive. A wind like this didn't happen before. It didn't happen afterwards. The minute these mines were exposed, that was it. There was no more wind. It was like the calm after the storm.
What's the food for thought I need to take with me in order to get it the way you think it is?
Just believe that it could happen. Just believe.
To many Israelis, there is no more powerful symbol of the struggle that Israel has endured to survive than this place, the Armored Corps Museum and Memorial at Latrun. But an equally powerful symbol of Israel's defiant struggle to survive is the man I'm going to meet today. Avigdor Kahalani is one of Israel's most famous war heroes. His personal story is legendary.
Avigdor, tell me about your first war.
Oh, the first time I fought in '67, in June. '67, six-day war. I was a company commander. I had a mission to go to El Arish. It's the capital of the Sinai.
נועה, לאל-עריש! סיני, שמעת מה שהמפקד אמר? תחנה הבאה אל-עריש. כן, המפקד!
What was about to happen to Avigdor Kahalani on the road to El Arish has become almost a legend in Israel's history, told to school children, remembered by almost anyone you meet on the street to whom you mention the name Kahalani.
עצור! נהג עצור! נהג עצור! חדלש! 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 ישראלים.
עצור! יש טנקים מצריים בכיוון הזה!
תודה, ביי.
עבור!
אוקיי, רפי, שמעת מה הוא אמר? נא להתקדם פול גז. נהג עצור, נהג עצור.
רפי התחבס טנקים מצרים בכוונת. אני רואה רק חפירות, לא טנקים.
נפגענו! נפגענו! לצאת החוצה!
As suffocating flames overpowered Kahalani's struggle to escape his burning tank, he drifted into unconsciousness. Before him passed the story of his life, his mother and father, his childhood friends, his family, his fellow soldiers, the faces of those he loved and cared for, those who cared for him, those he would never see again as his body resigned itself to death. Kahalani was suddenly, inexplicably filled with an overpowering desire to live. He summoned a strength he had never known. Avigdor Kahalani would not die this day.
I was in the hospital almost a year. 60% of my body was burned. I had 16 operations. After a year, I was allowed to go to the army, but they wanted to put me in the office. And I took the paper, and they wrote my medical profile 31. And in Israel, the maximum is 97. I took the paper, I cleaned it up, I wrote 97, and I go back to the tank.
Why in the world did you go on again?
You know, my father, when I joined to the army, he told me, look, my son, you're going to join the army. This is your turn. You're going to hold the flag on your hand and the flag of the country. Don't open the hand. It was a miracle for me to survive.
In 73, you go into battle again as a commander, right? Tell me what happened to you in that war.
It was hard combat in the Golan Heights. We lost 2/3 from the Golan Heights after less than 24 hours. My mission was to protect the area against the Syrian, and it was hard. We fought for 4 days. From Shabbat is Yom Kippur, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And the hardest day it was during Tuesday that we almost lost the combat.
Kahalani is given an order by Janusz, his commander, to stand his ground in the valley below their position. He has only 7 tanks left to face the Syrian armada. But when Janusz asks Kahalani over the radio how many tanks he has, he answers 41. Just in case the enemy was listening in, he later admits.
What happened to you that day?
Usually when you shoot with tanks, it's a range 2 miles. I had situation that I found 4 tanks in the front of me, 25 meters, and I was alone. And I scream, oh my God, I shoot him! And he didn't know what to do. It was so close to him. I thought I'm gonna kill him. I moved to another tank, and my loader put another shell, and he shot again. And when I put the main gun to the third one, I saw main gun of the Syrian tank look straight to my face, is ready to shoot. And my gunner was screaming, yelled. I saw the 115 millimeter look straight to my eyes, and he was ready. This is some kind of a situation how we fought on the Golan Heights during the Yom Kippur.
The battle for the Golan will ultimately come down to this final confrontation at a hilltop called Little Hermon, and the valley below it that will be known forever after as the Vale of Tears. If the Syrians make it past this point, nothing will stop them from storming across the Galilee, destroying Tiberias, Haifa, and ultimately Tel Aviv. Kahalani's remaining tanks have all taken Syrian hits. Many have lost commanders or whole crews. Command discipline is low. Morale is failing. Defeat is in the air. Kahalani gives an order to his tank commanders to move forward. No one moves. He tries cajoling them, even starting forward himself. No other tank follows. Kahalani had faced death in 1967 and survived, just as David had once faced down a bear and a lion that attacked his sheep. Both young men refused to bow to fear. David stepped up to face Goliath. Kahalani ordered his tank to move forward. David had declared, "I come not with sword and shield, but in the name of the God of Israel." He carried only 5 stones into battle with his giant. Kahalani moves forward with only 7 tanks to face the massive Syrian armada. Kahalani's crippled tanks storm the hill before them, looking down at the once green valley, now blackened with the smoldering remains of hundreds of burning Syrian and Israeli tanks from 3 days of fierce fighting. Moving among them, hundreds of Syrian tanks continue their relentless advance. Kahalani orders his tanks to begin a barrage of gunfire on the advancing armada below, not expecting to stop them, but at least hoping to slow their advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Reinforcements don't come, but suddenly, to his amazement and without explanation, the Syrians seem struck with fear. The enemy armada begins retreating. Syrian soldiers begin running from the battlefield in all directions. While Kahalani and his fellow soldiers are holding back the Syrian advance, they have no idea that they're part of another chain of events unfolding thousands of miles away from the battlefield, that many say is the real miracle story of this war. U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, in turning down Golda Meir's request for arms to defend her country, is reported to have said, "Let the Israelis bleed a little." Golda Meir is desperate. Without help, Israel will not survive many more days of the pounding assault from all sides, despite all the Kahalanis and those like him who are bravely defending their homeland and sacrificing their lives on all the front lines. And so she picks up the phone and calls the private line of U.S. President Richard Nixon. It is 3 o'clock in the morning. Television film producer and documentarian Bill McKay's investigation of the American role in the Yom Kippur War describes what happened when President Nixon took Golda Meir's call in the middle of the night.
Mr. President, if you don't help us, the Jewish people will never survive. He said something interesting, if not strange. He said, "You know, I could almost hear my mother's voice. She would tell me stories and read to me from the Old Testament, the heroes of the Bible. And one afternoon she said, 'Richard, someday you're going to be in a position where you can help save the Jewish people. And when that day comes, you must do everything in your power.'" And he said at that moment I realized, maybe for the first time in my presidency, why I had become President of the United States.
It was the largest airlift of armaments since World War II. The president kept his word. Everything Golda asked for, she got. Every weapon, every vehicle, every piece of equipment, and all the ammunition to operate them. A virtual arsenal airlifted overnight to Israel's front lines.
Many military experts credit that decision, that request, at that moment, as the essential element that saved Israel from destruction.
In another striking parallel to David in the Bible, Richard Nixon turned aside the Goliath of indifference to Israel in his government, faced down a powerful Secretary of State who would turn against him, and accepted the threat to his own presidency to save Israel in its hour of need. Before it was over, the Yom Kippur War demonstrated one of the most incredible turnaround victories ever recorded in military history. For his bravery and valor in the Vale of Tears, Avigdor Kahalani was dubbed a hero of Israel and received the nation's highest accolade for courage in the defense of his country. He would only say that his men fought well and that it was a miracle that saved Israel that day. The King David Hotel has played host to kings and queens, prime ministers and presidents, the world's powerful and famous. I'm here to meet a remarkable woman. Shula Cohen looks like she could be Whistler's mother or anybody's grandmother.
Hi. It's an honor to meet you.
But behind her quiet dignity is a woman of incredible courage and one of Israel's most famous spies. She claims her story is a miracle.
Well, tell me, how did you become a spy in the first place?
Well,
I was 17. It was Passover.
أهلا بك في بيتي.
Holiday was coming to an end.
هؤلاء أولادي.
That afternoon, this man, Joseph, came with his uncle and his sister. My father was very clever. He had all my sisters and my brothers and me come and sit and meet these people.
Ve Shula.
أيوة بنت اللطيفة عندك.
We had nothing in common with them. Joseph was 37 or something. The next day, my father says to me, Joseph would like to go to the YMCA. Go take him there. Well, I didn't think anything of that. When we came home, my mother was preparing a big party. And I saw my aunt, my friends, were all there.
בסדר, ברוך הבא, שלום. אוי, שולה. מה קורה לאנשים האלה? מזל טוב, ברכותיי, יקירתי.
על מה מזל טוב?
לא, זה בסדר. שולה. מזל טוב.
מזל טוב. איזה מזל טוב, על מה?
מזל טוב. על האירוסין שלה. את הראשונה, את מבינה? מזל טוב, מתוקה. מי היה מאמין שלה?
I couldn't believe my ears.
אמא? אמא?
או, שולה, הנה את. צריך להלביש אותך לכבוד האירוע.
אני לא מבינה מה קורה. מה כל הדיבורים האלה על אירוסין?
יקרה שלי, אביך עומד להכריז הערב על אירוסייך.
אינני עומד להינשא, מי זה?
תראי, את מתחתנת עם איש טוב. אבל זה כל מה שאביך מוכן שאני אגיד לך עכשיו. תלבשי את השמלה הלבנה.
אמא. איך הוא יכל? איך הוא יכל?
He had broken the Jewish law by not asking me first. I don't think I ever cried that way in my whole life. I was married in Beirut. My husband paid for everything, even my dowry. His family was very wealthy. We lived across the street from a Jewish school. There was a custom in Lebanon that once a year, every school or club should make a party to celebrate the end of the term. But in Lebanon, if you had that size of a gathering, you had to go to the prime minister for a permit. I don't know why, but when I saw him, I felt as though I was looking at my father. He was such a lovely man and warm.
Maintenant, comment puis-je?
Monsieur le Président, je suis Shula Cohen, je suis juive et mariée. Je suis ici pour le compte de l'école juive, afin d'obtenir une permission pour la fête de fin d'année de celle-ci. Les responsables de l'école pensent que vous n'accorderez pas cette autorisation. Mais je leur ai dit que vous êtes un homme honorable. Que je vous viendrai vous la demandant. C'est pour cela que je suis ici. Quelle est votre réponse, monsieur?
Écoutez, madame, ce n'est pas la première fois que l'école obtient la réponse. Chaque année, vous venez ici. Chaque année, vous l'obtenez. Tout ira bien. Nous ferons pour vous comme chaque année.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je ne vous prendrai pas plus de votre temps.
Madame Cohen?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Votre autorisation sera prête dans 2 jours. Cela fera une différence pour vous de ne pas revenir me voir dans mon bureau?
Non, absolument pas, avec plaisir.
Et donc, vous viendrez me voir chez moi? Disons 2 heures?
Oui, pourquoi pas. Merci.
Eh, pourquoi pas?
In the car going home, I told myself, why did you tell him you're going to his house? I don't know if he's married, not married, what kind of a man he is. When I went back to get the papers, The Prime Minister wanted me to meet his family.
Shula, ahlan bik fi bayti.
We took tea, and I met his wife and his daughters. His youngest was maybe 2 years older than me. We became best friends. The Prime Minister once said to me, "Once I had 3 daughters. Now I have 4, and my table is complete." Well, I came to know all the leaders in Lebanon and Syria, too, and they all knew me.
But you hadn't started spying yet, had you?
That started in 1947. Israel wasn't yet born, and already there was talk about a war if they declared a state. That Christmas, 1947, the Prime Minister had a big Christmas party. It was something he did every year. The who's who of Lebanon and Syria were there. Prime Minister's wife and daughters were there. And of course, there was Shula. The one Jew among all those Arabs. During the party, I overheard voices talking about attacking Israel. They were the top generals from Lebanon and Syria, and they were preparing 2 attacks on the Jews in Palestine. It wasn't Israel yet. I heard when, how, every detail. I began to tremble. Inside, I was praying. God, what if I am hearing is going to happen? I couldn't sleep. I looked up at the sky and I prayed.
אלוהים, מה שמעתי? כל כך הרבה אנשים ימותו. איזה אסון עומד לקרות? מה לעשות? מה לעשות?
The next morning, I saw myself still doing nothing. After thinking about it a lot, I remembered one of the things we learned in school was how to make invisible ink.
نايمة؟ ألم يقولوا لك؟
I made up as much of the liquid as I could. It worked. I had not forgotten. So I wrote a letter in English as if to my cousin. And then, with the invisible ink, I wrote the details of what I had heard the general say. I addressed the letter to Jerusalem. That's all I wrote on the envelope. But what to do with the letter, I didn't know. I decided to go to my husband in his shop. But in those days, a married woman did not do such a thing. She would be looked down on. It was not done. But I had to go.
وسنكون على اتصال. شولا، ماذا تفعلين هنا؟ أجئت من بيتك إلى هنا لتبكي؟
ابنة عمي في القدس وهي مريضة وستذهب للمستشفى لتجري عملية وأنا لا أعرف شيئا عن هذا الأمر. أنا قلقة جدا ولا أستطيع أن أنام ولقد كتبت لهذه الرسالة ولا أعرف إذا ستصل بسبب الخدود المغلقة. ما كان علي أن آتي إلى هنا يا جوزيف لكنني لا أعرف ماذا أفعل.
حسنا، لا تقلقي، دعيني أفكر. قد يكون لدي الحل. عندي زبون درزي وهو يسكن بجانب الحدود، ويأتي هنا كل أسبوع، وسوف يأتي بعد نصف ساعة. إذا أخذ الرسالة قد يستطيع أن يعطيها إلى أحد عبر الحدود، ولكن دعيني أسأله.
تظني أن بإمكاني أن يرسلها إلى القدس؟
لست أدري، ولكن هذه أفضل فكرة خطرت لي. أن ترجعي إلى بيتك الآن، أن ترجعي إلى بيتك. أعطني، ارجعي إلى بيتك وأنا سوف أسأله حين يأتي.
ولكنك قلت أنه سيأتي بعد نصف ساعة.
نعم، هذا ما قاله.
إذن سوف أنتظره.
شولا، دعي الأمر لي شولا وارجعي إلى بيتك.
لن أرتاح حتى أعرف إذا أخذ الرسالة أم لم يأخذها.
ها هو هنا. أنت محظوظة يا شولا. أهلا سيد عمر.
أهلا سيد عمر.
بضاعتك جاهزة وسوف يقوم العمال بتحميلها إلى سيارتك.
شكرا سيد كوهين.
عمر، أود أن أطلب منك طلبا.
Now, mind you, he hadn't even looked at the envelope to see it was addressed to Jerusalem. But he turned to me and said,
لكن يوجد عندي صديقان اثنان جنديان في الهجنة. يأتي واحد منهما كل ليلة إلي في المحل. ربما قد تكون تلك الطريقة الوحيدة التي ممكن أن أساعدك فيها.
إذا كان هذا كل ما تستطيع أن تفعله سيكون كافياً. أعطي الرسالة.
طاب يومك سيدة كوهين.
شكراً.
The Druze man had no idea that this is exactly what I wanted. A few days later, it was after Christmas. It was raining very hard.
ما هذا؟
افتحيه وسوف تري بنفسك.
It read something to the effect. Thank you very much. We would like to know you and talk to you. I thought about what Israel was asking of me. She does not know me. If she asked me, she must not have anyone else to turn to. So I decided I was going to try. I told my husband I was going to see a friend, and I went with the Arab man to meet the Israelis. This is the way it all began. This is the way I became a spy.
And you managed to keep all this from your husband?
When I started smuggling Jews out of Lebanon, I turned to him for help. I just needed money, and he gave it to me. He didn't know about the political information I was giving to Israel. But eventually, everything was in the newspapers. The spy, they called me.
How did you get caught?
I often received documents for Israel and then passed them on to whomever was supposed to get them.
Yasmin, 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 Yasmin. أين الرسالة الملعونة؟
جدوا هذه الرسالة، دمروا هذا البيت. لا يهون ماذا تفعلوا، عليكم أن تجدوا هذه الرسالة. أنا أعرف أن الرسالة هناك ولن أخرج بدونها.
Under my breath, I told God, please, Israel does not need you now. I need you today. 6 children are going to be orphans. Please, God, save me from that hand.
هل رأيت تضع رسالة هناك؟
نعم سيدي.
إذا ارمي كل شيء للأرض وجد الرسالة.
ثبات سيدي.
إذا اكمل التفتيش.
عار عليك تصرفك هذا. ما امرأة انجبت قبل زمن قليل؟
لا تقلقي، سوف نجدها يا خاهنة. ستأتي معي للكسر.
أنا أعرف حقوقي. أين الشرطة اللبنانية؟ أنتم لستم القانون هنا. يجب أن ألبس قبل ذلك وأرضي مولودي.
انتظر هناك ولا تدع تغرب عن عينيك.
أنت متزوج؟
نعم. ليه ماذا؟
أنت أكيد لا عارف ليش. أنا لازم أسكر الباب الوقت اللي أنا بلبس.
دقيقة واحدة.
Michael, I don't know what you believe, or if you believe. But what I tell you is what happened. I put my hand under the baby's clothes, and there was the document. There is no way they could not have found it. That was the miracle. That was really the miracle.
When they took you down to the police station, what happened?
Oh, they interrogated me till 3 in the morning that first day.
نحن نعلم بأنك تعملين السلاح الإسرائيليون لسنوات. من شخص الاتصال سيدة كوهن؟
لا أعرف ماذا تقول.
سيدة كوهن، نحن مثلك لا نريد أن نطيل بأداء الأمر. فاكت كل لنا من أعطاك الرسالة.
لا أعرف أي رسالة.
من هو مسؤول الموساد في لبنان؟
لست أدري.
كم عميل يوجد في بيروت؟
لا أدري. من فضلك لا أدري.
أنا مسؤول في الحكومة.
من فضلك لا أعرف. من فضلك لا أعرف. من فضلك أريد العودة إلى بيتي وأولادي.
سيدة كوهن، لا تصعبي علي. قولي لنا ما نريد وعود إلى البيت.
فضلك لا أدري ما تقول.
I was in solitary confinement for 2.5 years. Every few days, they would interrogate me again, trying to break me down. But they couldn't. All the Arab countries wanted my death. No attorney in Lebanon would defend me because their career would be destroyed if they did.
السيدة كوهن، لقد قمت بتسريب ملفات سرية بشكل غير قانوني لعملاء إسرائيليين، أليس كذلك؟
لا.
السيدة كوهن، لقد قمت بذلك، ألم تقومي بذلك؟
لا أكذب.
سيدة كوهن، لا تكذبي لهذه المحكمة. أنت عميلة الموساد، أليس كذلك؟
لا.
نعم، أنت كذلك، وسوف تقولين الحقيقة أمام هذه المحكمة.
علموا أننا لا نعيش وحدنا في هذا العالم. الله يجزيكم.
السيدة كوهن! سيدة كوهن، قولي لنا الحقيقة. هذه فرصتك الأخيرة. سيدة كوهن؟
لا 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 The Arabs, the Syrians, they do what they want. Afterwards, they took the nails out from my feet. After a while, I was like a mental patient coming to the trial. I wasn't allowed to eat or drink or have anything from home. Finally, when they saw they could get nothing out of me, the prosecutor had my legs tied tight and my arms tied, and they hung me upside down. When the prosecutor gave the order, one whip went down and the other up, and the blood would come from my legs, and I would faint. And the doctor would check to see that I was alive, and they would begin again. Each time I would pray, God, please help me. Give me the strength to show that we are Jews, not animals. Give me the force to pass this one more trial. After so much, they thought that I would confess, but I didn't. But I was not proud. I was finished. No legs, no hands, no teeth. Other things I cannot dare to speak of that they have done to me.
شولا كوهين، لقد ثبت أمام هيئة المحكمة إدانتك بتهمة الخيانة العظمى، وعليه نصدر حكمنا بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت.
I was sentenced to death, even though they had no evidence. The Syrians wanted to hang me in the city square and let my body rot for 7 days. My husband bribed many officials to get my sentence changed. Well, it was finally changed to life imprisonment, and then 20 years. But I have no doubt the Syrians would have had me executed one way or another had it not been for the Six-Day War. When the war was over, Lebanon had one of Israel's pilots. When they negotiated for his release, Israel remembered Shula Cohen. The two of us were exchanged for not 496 Lebanese and Syrian prisoners of war. When I came out, I told them I would not leave without my family. The Lebanese let them come. But they left behind everything. Our big house, everything we owned, we left behind. Whatever I did was not for Shula Cohen. I did it for Israel, for God.
On Sunday morning, June 27, 1976, Air France Flight 139 departed from Tel Aviv's David Ben-Gurion Airport with 229 passengers bound for Athens and then Paris. most on holiday, many with children, wives, and sweethearts. A short flight to Athens was uneventful. The plane landed. A few passengers got off, others got on. After a short while, Flight 139 again departed for Paris. It never made it. Passenger Sarah Davidson was on Flight 139 along with her husband Uzi and their 2 sons. It was going to be a holiday.
I didn't see anything outstanding in the plane, but I heard a shout from the first class, and I saw a waitress coming in front of us, and she looked frightened so much, and I told Uzi, listen, we are hijacked.
Sit down. May I have your attention, please? This plane is now under our control.
What was the feeling you had then?
Oh, you can't describe it. It's such a shock. The only thing that I remember was the eyes of my 2 boys. They were looking up. It was her first flight in their life. It was the first vacation that we decided to take them with us out of the country. And the big one, Ron, said, oh God, why it happened to us? Then Uzi remembered that in his pocket he has a pass to get to his army base. So we took the pass and we chewed it. And we put it into a can of cola.
You wanted to hide your identity.
Of course.
Flight 139 had been commandeered by 5 Palestinians and 2 German neo-Nazis, members of 2 radical terrorist groups. The captain managed to signal Athens of the hijacking. Greece immediately alerted both Israel and France. Israeli special forces were put on alert. Prime Minister Rabin was reached during a session of the Knesset. Meanwhile, on Air France 139, the hijackers ordered the plane to fly to Benghazi on the northern coast of Libya. 1 passenger, a pregnant woman needing emergency medical care, was allowed to leave the plane. The plane refueled, then took off again, this time for Entebbe, Uganda.
When we were on the air, we were very frightened that it's all going to burst out and we are going to be killed in the air.
You thought they'd blow up the plane?
Yeah, they said that they are going to do that. If we move, if we do that, if we do that. We were so frightened, we just followed the orders, that's it.
When you had these hijackers threatening you,
Yeah.
what were you feeling as a Jew?
I felt anger because I knew there were 2 Germans. I also recognized in the accent of the hijacker who was in the cockpit that he is not an Arab, he was a German. Thank God I wasn't in the Holocaust, but all my family, my parents, brothers and sisters, my grandpa and grandmother, everybody there were killed in the Holocaust. And to think that 2 Germans can, these days, to do the same thing to us, it was a terrible feeling.
מטוס נחת באוגנדה. They've landed in Uganda.
Uganda? But Israel has no diplomatic relations with Uganda.
Yes, you are right. But the foreign minister is on it right now, trying to reach Amin through the French authorities.
When we saw outside Idi Amin, we were happy. We were so happy to see him there because we knew he is a friend of Israel. We saw around him some Arabs, and we understand that they are the commanders of the whole thing. But we thought, here we are going to another plane to fly back to Paris, and that's it.
I want to help you. And now, shut up!
They put us into an old terminal, very dirty, with some old chairs. They were standing around. We understood that here we are in prison. I remember hearing shouting and crying because many people just realized what happened.
Everybody stay where you are now.
And nobody talks.
Will you shut up?
Sarah and the other passengers have no idea that their ordeal is only beginning. Tuesday, June 29th. Late in the day, the terrorists make their demand. Return of the passengers and crew in exchange for the release of 53 convicted terrorists in Israel's jails and 4 others imprisoned elsewhere in Europe. If this demand is not met within 48 hours, the plane will be blown up with all passengers aboard. You must have felt very far away from home.
All this week we were thinking that if we could be a little bit closer, maybe our army could save us. But being so far away, we even couldn't dream about anybody from Israel coming to save us. We tried to organize somehow this life in prison. We, the Israelis, find out somehow between 250 people, we found each other and we were gathering, maybe not all of us, but part of us, starting talking to each other, Hebrew of course, because there were a lot of French people, a lot of American and others.
זאת אוגנדה, כאן אנטבה, זה אגם ויקטוריה, ופה קניה.
אז כל מה שאנחנו צריכים זה לחצות את אגם ויקטוריה.
אני לא יודעת לשחות.
Did the Israelis look out for each other just because
Yeah.
they knew the same language, or is it something about...
No. I can't describe it, but it's a feeling that when you are in trouble, you need your brothers around you, and they are coming. Part of us were religious people, so they were praying all the time. I envy them. I would like to, but you can't change your whole state of mind in one day. And I had to look after my 2 boys. Ron, the big one, was sick, very sick. He got high fever. The doctor among the terrorists wanted to transfer him to the hospital. We didn't let him, thank God. I have to take care of Benny, who was frightened to death because of all what happens around.
Were you frightened?
Of course I was, but I think that taking care of the children took it out from me somehow.
The government has decided to commence negotiation for the release of the hostages being held in Entebbe. We've agreed in principle to release prisoners.
Negotiations begin with the terrorists in order to buy time, while military planners face the implausible possibility of safely mounting a rescue operation 2,400 miles away. Shiki Shani will pilot the C-130 aircraft that will attempt to bring a rescue team to Entebbe, a mission far from certain when it was proposed.
Did you really think from the beginning that there was a possibility of doing this?
We were convinced that we can do it. We were convinced that nobody will expect us to be so crazy to do it, and that's why we can do it. Technically, it's not a big deal. You fly, you land, you pick up the hostages, you fly back. What's the big deal? But the surprise was the issue. I mean, if we can keep it quiet and if we keep it as a total surprise, we'll bring the hostages back. And Rabin himself, being the prime minister, he expected it, and I truly believe that it can be done.
After 2 days of being all together in very bad conditions, they said that they want to release our conditions to make it more comfort, and they will pass part of us to the other room.
When your name is called, pick up your things and go through that opening into the next room. Is that clear? Goldstein! That's me. Rappaport! Mr. and Mrs. Cohen!
After 5, 6 names, we realized that they are calling only the Israelis, only the Jews. Among us were Holocaust survivors that really passed again a selection. And for us, Israelis born here in Israel, we couldn't even dream that such a thing can happen again, and it happened.
אתה רואה את זה? אף אחד לא בא אז, אף אחד לא יבוא היום. אם אנחנו לא דואגים לעצמנו, אף אחד לא דואג לנו.
Wednesday, June 30th. The terrorists begin to release the non-Jewish and non-Israeli Air France passengers. First a group of 47 and later the remaining 101. The captain and crew of Air France 139 refused to leave without all their passengers.
I'm responsible for the lives of these passengers, all of them. Why the separation?
You're not going to take them anywhere.
they determined to share whatever fate befalls the Jews. Jewish and Israeli passengers remain at gunpoint in the Entebbe terminal, while the hostages of Air France 139 are occupied with their survival. Israel is occupied with their rescue.
We had only one obstacle that we need to overcome. If somebody find out that we are there or coming or getting closer, or because it's the middle of the night, somebody will switch off the runway lights. Here you fly 7 hours and 30 minutes from Sharm el-Sheikh, where we took off in the Sinai, and you get, there's no runway lights. So we had to develop a technique, and we had 2-3 days for that, to land on a dark runway at night. And then we had to demonstrate our capability to the leadership of the military. We just had to take all our capabilities, all our knowledge, and to put it, pack it into one night and just do it.
חוליה מספר 1. חוליות שוקי ומאיר.
Thursday, July 1st. The deadline for release of terrorists from Israeli prisons passes. Israeli negotiators managed to convince the hijackers to extend the deadline to Sunday at 2 p.m. The terrorists vow that if this deadline is not met, the hostages will be executed. The Entebbe rescue effort is dubbed Operation Thunderbolt, and the timetable is accelerated. At Entebbe, one of the hostages, Mrs. Dora Bloch, takes deathly ill and is removed to a hospital in Kampala. It will prove to be a tragic move.
It was Friday that everybody started being sick, stomach, and the water in the toilets were gone. Idi Amin came and told us that the negotiations went very bad. Israel is not ready to release terrorists, so on Sunday they will start killing people. Who will be the first, nobody knows.
Late into the night on July 2nd, Shiki and the other IDF pilots practice landing the C-130s in the dark, anticipating the landing lights may be turned off at the Entebbe airport. The next morning, July 3rd, the combat units load their equipment and vehicles and wait for the signal that the mission is operational. The word comes at noon. At 1:20 p.m., they are airborne. With the planes already in the air, Prime Minister Rabin summons the full Israeli cabinet. They give the final approval for Operation Thunderbolt. Shiki and his fellow pilots must now deliver 200 Israeli special forces and their equipment over 2,400 miles of hostile Arab territory without being detected, or worse yet, shot down. Shiki and his fellow pilots fly as low as possible to avoid radar detection, subjecting themselves to turbulent weather and violent storms over Lake Victoria.
It was a one-way ticket. We didn't have fuel to fly back. We needed to do some fueling somewhere on the way back, or in Entebbe itself. Needless to say that we couldn't hear the radio after we took off. And again, remember, surprise was the issue. If somebody pick us up and somebody do the linkage. Ethiopia, they didn't have a real Air Force or radar, so we flew higher to make it more comfortable. It was night. And then we split into myself to land single to maximum surprise, minimum noise. The other three were just holding pattern over the Victoria Lake.
11:01 p.m. Only seconds behind schedule, Shiki Shani's C-130 lands at the outer marker of Entebbe Airport and unloads the black Mercedes and escort vehicles intended to make the Ugandan guards at the terminal think Idi Amin is paying a late-night visit to the hostages. The deception works. Only near the terminal do 2 Ugandan guards attempt to stop the vehicles. They are shot. The paratroopers run the remaining 40 yards to the entrance of the terminal. It's now a race against time to avoid a massacre of the hostages.
Put up a little bit my head, and I saw a soldier wearing a uniform, holding a big gun. He looks to me very small, maybe because I was on the floor. And then he said in Hebrew, חבר'ה, באנו לקחת אתכם הביתה.
באנו לקחת אתכם הביתה.
It's guys, we came to take you home. Listen, how can you describe that?
How?
Told you. I don't know. For me, if he would have wings and it has been an angel, it wouldn't be strange for me as I heard this Hebrew sentence so close, so feeling at home, in such a faraway place that I couldn't even dream that I will hear Hebrew so close to me.
Unfortunately, in the crossfire, we lost a couple of hostages. And then, only then, like 10 minutes after that, we landed the other 3 airplanes that were waiting, just more forces, and 1 airplane just to pick up all the passengers.
Within 3 minutes, the gun battle inside the old terminal is over. All 7 hijackers are dead. 2 hostages are killed in the crossfire. Outside, the gun battle continues with the Ugandan collaborators as the hostages are evacuated to the waiting C-130s. Tragically, Force Commander Yoni Netanyahu, brother of the future Prime Minister of Israel, is also struck down by sniper fire as he leads the hostages to safety. Dora Bloch, the sick hostage who had been taken to a hospital in Kampala, is later murdered on Idi Amin's orders. Within 58 minutes of landing at Entebbe, the freed hostages are airborne. On the ground, IDF infantry stay behind to destroy Russian MiGs parked on the airfield to prevent any pursuit. At precisely 40 minutes past midnight on July 4th, the last IDF airplane departs Entebbe.
We took off one after the other, landed in Nairobi, refueled the airplanes, and then we came back home. Flew back home 8 hours.
Were you confident that you would succeed?
Yes, because we were super motivated. We were highly trained on knowing the job, and we also believed that we deserved it. This country suffered so much. This country had so many wars. And here comes an opportunity. And, I mean, it's justice. It's maybe God is going to work overtime that day.
How long did it take before you came back down to earth and started to understand this was really happening?
Until I got back home, I was in a stage of shock because it's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. I was sure that I'm in a kind of a dream, that it's not real. It can't be. sure it was a miracle. Beside all the credits to the army, to the planners, to the pilots, to the soldiers, I'm sure something more happened that we can't describe and maybe we can't understand.
To be a military pilot and to be involved in saving life, this is wonderful. You do what you are trained to do as a military pilot, but you save life. It makes me feel wonderful even now, almost 30 years after that.
How did it change your view of yourself and of life itself?
It gives you another proportion to what happened in everyday life.
So where's the miracle at Entebbe? How could 6 Israeli aircraft travel 2,400 miles over hostile nations without once being detected by Arab or African radar? How was it possible for 4 giant C-130 transports, planes that can easily be heard a mile away, to glide at night onto a fully lit airport runway where 100 Ugandan soldiers and 7 hijackers are on high alert without anyone seeing or hearing these howling transports? There were snipers and sentries posted on the Entebbe airport tower, yet why didn't anyone see the planes landing just 1,000 feet away? Did some force blind their eyes? In the Bible, God blinded the eyes of those who would do his servants harm. Did this happen at Entebbe? Is it mere coincidence that the old terminal at Entebbe was built by an Israeli construction company who was able to provide the invaluable blueprints to the rescue planners? There was a Ugandan fighter squadron of Russian MiGs stationed at Entebbe, yet they didn't scramble. And mysteriously, there were no pilots around. How come? The assault on the old terminal lasted less than 3 minutes, killing all 7 hijackers and rescuing the hostages. Within 7 minutes, the hostages were on board the C-130 that would take them home. Strategic planning, military skill, even good luck are just not adequate explanations. Perhaps a miracle is the only logical answer. Are miracles real? Did they happen to these people I met? Is there a miracle waiting to happen in our lives? I somehow believe that if any of us search long enough and honestly enough, we will find the truth. And it will be very personal, and it will be our miracle. You decide.